Okay. So I was forced to do a small presentation about BSD-CAN. I guess I don't have to introduce myself, you know me more or less. So, small disclosure, it's my opinion. Everything which I will say here, it's only my opinion. I will criticize or whatever is still on me. It's not associated with any groups or work that I'm doing. So, BSD-CAN is had a place in the country which is very proud for 4 things. First one is How I Met Your Mother. Another one is Justin Bieber. Philip and Terence, and of course OpenBSD, and it's from Canada, right? So mine was pretty much full of BSD events. First we start from OpenBSD Hackathon, which I will tell a few words about. Then we have a BeehiveCon, which I didn't attend, so I also will only give brief description of it. Then we have a FreeBSD Dev Summit and tutorials and BSD-CAN, so the main event which we will discuss here. And later we had a FreeBSD Hackathon, which I also will tell a little bit about because I attend both of them, BSD-CAN and FreeBSD Hackathon. Unfortunately, I didn't attend OpenBSD Hackathon and BeehiveCon, so I can only give a short description of them. So let's start with OpenBSD Hackathon. I'm not OpenBSD guy, so I can imagine that it was looking something like that everybody was working on some stuff and trying to do some work around OpenBSD, or it was looking something more like that. I don't know, to be honest. I know only that it was there in Canada. It took around 1 week and some work was done. So if you want some more insight, I guess you can ask Philip or Adam about how hackathon look like. I don't know, unfortunately. So after OpenBSD Hackathon, there was a BeehiveCon, which is a short conference. It's only 1 day about BSD hypervisor. It's called BeehiveCon, but it's really about any hypervisor in BSD world. So it's also about OpenBSD hypervisor, NetBSD, and so on and so on. And even we discussed some stuff about the Zen or I think Zen. So those are the topics that was discussed. We had a NetBSD VMM, which is a NetBSD hypervisor. There was short introduction, what new stuff was introduced then, and I think this was also done by a Polish guy, Kamil, he is very active in NetBSD community. Then we have a short presentation about OpenBSD hypervisor, which is called VMM, and how the BSD network is hosted on it. So you can look into that. I guess this presentation was very interesting. Another one was porting Beehive to SmartOS. SmartOS is a port from Open Solaris, so it's like Solaris distribution. And they ported the Beehive, so hypervisor from FreeBSD. Then we have NVMe emulation in Beehive, and some other presentations about Beehive. The last presentation was from the Intel guy, which I believe was the same which he gave on the FreeBSD Dev Summit, which we will talk a little bit in a moment. So during the same time, FreeBSD Dev Summit, and there was also a tutorials during the BSD-CAN. So if you wanted to attend Dev Summit, you couldn't attend tutorials. I attended FreeBSD Dev Summit, so I will talk a little bit more about that. Unfortunately, I didn't attend any tutorials. So FreeBSD Dev Summit is 2-day summit. It's invite only, so only the people from FreeBSD community can go. Every committer is invited, but we also can invite some other people. So we had around 55 committers, which is quite large amount, and we invited 30 more people. This is the biggest Dev Summit that you have in the world. There is no bigger Dev Summit. This is not a hackathon. We discuss the future about the FreeBSD. So we discuss the problems, we discuss where we want to be in future, what new features we want to see, but it's not hackathon. We don't code there as much as we would like to. We more discuss about the ideas, about the approaches we should go or the direction we should take. So this is not a hackathon. It's much more different than OpenBSD hackathons, where what I can imagine, they basically code all the time. So we have also a schedule of Dev Summit. So first there was setup and opening. This is not very interesting, but then there was a FreeBSD Foundation presentation, Intel presentation, NetApp, I will tell her a little bit about that, and failsafe boot code. And then we could basically choose whatever talk you want to attend. I will talk a little bit about failsafe boot code session, because I think this was the most interesting one. So FreeBSD Foundation, basically what it goes, it describes what FreeBSD Foundation does, how they spend money, how they support, they present all the members of FreeBSD Foundation, they describe what they want to do in the future, and so on and so on. Quite interesting if you are interested in what FreeBSD Foundation do with their money, what kind of the project they support. If you spend some money to FreeBSD Foundation, you probably want to see it. The most important part in this presentation was that the president of FreeBSD Foundation has changed. Previously, George Neville Neal was a president for the last 1 year, and now that Justin Gibbs is come back to the being a president of FreeBSD Foundation. In the past, he was the original president and founder of FreeBSD Foundation. During the last year, because of his private stuff, he couldn't be a president. Now he come back. So next presentation was about the Intel. From the Intel, the Scott Phillips, who is a new commentator in FreeBSD Foundation, was talking about the Beehive and UFI. Like I mentioned, this was probably the same presentation like during the BeehiveCon, so you can watch both of them, I guess, because it's interesting. Dev Summit is kind of invite-only meeting, but all the recordings from Dev Summit and BeehiveCon are online. So if you want to see any of those presentations, you can go and see them. And then we have a short presentation from NetApp, which was talking about integrating and testing on FreeBSD and how they build products around FreeBSD. So for me, the most interesting part of the day was failsafe, which basically goes that we have a good way of upgrading our FreeBSD bugs. We can use a boot flags to upgrade a bugs with the UFS file system, and we have a boot environment if you want to have a ZFS upgrade. Boot environments and boot flags was described by Wojciech a few meetings ago, so I will not go into more details. If you want to, you can watch the BSD-PL presentation this time. And the problem was how you can upgrade your boot code itself. So if you have a machine which have, for example, a newer version of FreeBSD, you will upgrade your boot code and you will upgrade your, let's say, ZFS, and something will go wrong with the boot code, how you can roll back the code to the previous state without, of course, putting the memstick and resetting the boot code. So it was pretty interesting. I don't think we solved the GPT problem, but UFI basically have a special functions that the designers already solved it in the UFI. So we will use this UFI trick, which allows you to have a multiple version of UFI, but the GPT version is still something that we have to work on. So then we have a FreeBSD Dev Summit Day 2. The first presentation was Core. The core of FreeBSD was presenting their status. Then we have a FreeBSD list of the features that we would like to see. Basically, how it goes, there is some speaker who goes in front of everybody and asks the room what they have, what they would like to have in FreeBSD 14. So basically what features we are working on, what patches do we have, and maybe some testing is needed. So this is how we find some people that can work on. Then we have three more presentations, but those two are, in my opinion, the most interesting ones. So basically how the core update went is that we had a survey some time ago. So we went over all the questions in the survey and see some results. So for example, what is version of FreeBSD you are using, and so on and so on. The most important outcome of the survey was that we have a working group that wants to move a SVN from SVN to Git. So now the CVS that we will use probably will be Git. So the case with the Git is that there is a working group, so we still didn't decide kinda if we want to move to Git or not. It's a working group, so they will decide, and they will also decide how we will move it, or how if we will host our repository in GitHub or self-hosting or so on. This is only that core created a working group. So all the outcome of the working group will be announced later. So this is only announcing that working group is created. And it's not looking quite good, I guess, on the slide, but like I mentioned, the FreeBSD 14 session was basically describing and throwing out of all the ideas that we would like to have in FreeBSD 14. And the most important thing was that we also assigned people who are willing to work on that. So those are the features that you really can look into in the FreeBSD 14. So like I mentioned, besides FreeBSD Dev Summit, we also have the tutorials. I couldn't attend any of them, but tutorials are basically a step-by-step classes, what to do something. There are during the Dev Summit, like I mentioned before, and they are you need to pay extra to attend them. So there are some, basically you need to pay some extra cash to attend any of the tutorials. So we had the OpenBSD porting workshop. It took all day, and we have two other tutorials: the OpenSMT and OpenBSD packet filter. So those was the tutorials during the first day, and during the second day we have a BGP tutorial, which also took whole day, and then libTLS and Isinga and OpenSSH tutorial. So unfortunately, those tutorials are closed. You cannot just go there, and they are not recorded. So and you also don't get any material. So you need to sign up for the tutorials to know anything about them. So sorry about that. So after the FreeBSD Dev Summit and tutorials, we had finally BSDCan. BSDCan is also a 2 days event. We start, of course, from the opening session. Like I mentioned, this is the biggest conference in the world about the BSD. Unfortunately, this year was kind of not many people attended. I mean, less than normally. You can see that last year there was almost 300 of people, and this year it was a little bit more than 200. Dan was saying that this is maybe because there was a Victoria Day, so they had a long weekend in Canada. So maybe this was the reason why I didn't attend. Because the other conference, which Dan also is organizing, the PGCon, which was I think a little bit over 1 week later, was also a little bit less attended. So, but yeah, this is the biggest BSD conference in the world. And then we went through the presentations. I attended the ZFS snapshot work done by Matt Ahrens. Matt Ahrens is original author of ZFS, and he was giving a presentation about how snapshot works. It's very technical, very detailed, and very complicated. So I guess I will need to go over one more time to understand everything, because it was like quite complicated to understand it for the first time, and there was he described a lot of different algorithms how snapshot could be implemented or was implemented in the past in the ZFS. So it was pretty exciting. To be honest, I heard a lot of good opinions about other presentation at the same slot. This was about the building an accessible OpenBSD laptop. I heard that the presentation was amazing. I didn't saw it yet, but I'm planning to see it on the YouTube. Basically, it was about building a FreeBSD, OpenBSD laptop for the friend who has some disabilities, and he was talking about all the things that can be done for making it more accessible for him. So it was very good presentation. Next, we had another presentation slot. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend any of them because I had some other discussions about ZFS. So from those presentations, I really can recommend you the Michael Lucas presentation. Somebody told me also that it was a very excellent one. Or if you are more into the embedded things, you can also see the Adventures in DRM done by Emmanuel, who is a FreeBSD developer who's doing an embedded stuff. Then there was basically a lunch. During the lunch, you have a 3 or 4, or depending on the time slot availability, rooms. And in different rooms, you have a different discussion. So during the lunch, you can take your food and go to some room and have a discussion, for example, about OpenZFS or about amateur radio or network for system administrators. I went for OpenZFS both, which was basically discussion about the future of ZFS, and there was a materials, there was other people who wanted to talk about ZFS. I've been in the middle of I needed to move in the middle of it, unfortunately, and I went also to the amateur radio presentation, because in the same room was my presentation, so I wanted to prepare myself. And to be honest, the presentation about amateur radio was pretty cool, and if you have time and interest in such stuff, I really recommend you seeing it, because even I, who don't know anything about amateur radio, feel kind of excited about the stuff he was talking about, the Aaron was talking about. So if you are into this stuff, I really, and this was kind of different approach than normal both, because Aaron also has slides, which is normally is just our lighting talks. So you basically can talk whatever you want, and and ask questions, and somebody from the room can answer them. But Aaron was pretty much was very prepared to the presentation, and he even had slides and so on. So you can see the slides on the BSDCan's website. Unfortunately, both isn't recorded, so you cannot see them, but you can watch the slides.
By the way, the networking BOF is not about computer networking, but connecting people to each other, like how to run a BSD user group.
Oh, because the other day there was also the BSD user group. But yeah, okay, I will. So networking and system administrator was, I will repeat for the recording, that was more about the connecting the people than system itself. And you attended them? Okay. So next there was I guess the coolest slot of the day and the conferences, because to be honest, I would go to all of those presentations. Of course, I went to the best one, mine, but there was also some others. So first presentation was about improving the security of boot process, done by Michał Stanek. Michał is working at Semihalf, the company from Krakow. I saw this presentation from the other guy from Semihalf on the Asia BSDCan. It's very technical, very cool. If you are into the boot process and TPMs. It's very interesting to see them. Then, of course, was my presentation, which you should watch, or I will came here and give this presentation for you. Then we have diving and OpenBSD. So basically, how you can use OpenBSD for diving. So it's also pretty exciting. And at the end, there was a presentation about Netflix and FreeBSD. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend any of those three, but the boot process I saw in Asia, so I can really recommend them. And the rest of those two, I heard very good opinions. So if you're interested in the topic, then you can also enjoy them. This is me talking about during my my presentation. Afterwards, there was the most interesting presentation, the future of OpenZFS and FreeBSD. And basically, this was the presentation, what will happen with OpenZFS, what is ZFS on Linux, why is so much rant about ZFS on Linux on FreeBSD. So if you still have some troubles with understanding the difference between ZFS on Linux and OpenZFS and what will happen with ZFS on Linux, I really recommend the presentation from Alan, who described all of that. A little bit spoiler, the idea of ZFS on Linux is not that there will be a ZFS on Linux version, but we will take the code base from ZFS on Linux, who right now have the most features in ZFS world, and we will create a common source code for all the projects to take from. And there will be some directories with depending code for all the operating systems. So basically, ZFS on Linux will finally become OpenZFS, which was the original idea of OpenZFS, to have a common source code for all of the other operating systems. After that, I went for the fusing the kernel from Andrew Tanner, who was talking about using AFLL to fuse the FreeBSD kernel. And that was the final presentation of the day. Later was some small party and networking part. Oh no, sorry. It was after the day too, so sorry. I spoiled it. So the day two, we started with two very interesting presentations. I have unfortunately went for a Cherry ABI presentation. Basically, Cherry is a capability-based CPU, which can store a little bit more permissions of the pointers. So we can say a little bit more about the pointers, starting from the bandwidth, also about the capabilities that it's had. So this may be implemented in new version of ARM, so it's very exciting. And Brooks is a very good presenter. So if you're interested in Cherry, you should see this presentation. And another interesting presentation, which unfortunately I couldn't attend, is Bob Beck, a presentation about Anvil, which is a sandbox technique, thing of limiting the access to the file systems on OpenBSD. So yeah, I see the slides. I didn't saw the presentation itself, but it was looking very funny with such photos from Bob Beck. I believe he was doing his renovation of his basement, right? So it was pretty funny one. Afterwards, there was presentation, two really interesting presentations. One was the Frankenstein disk drive, which I couldn't attend, but I hope I will watch them later. But I went for the MQTT for system administrators, and MQTT is a special protocol which allow you to connect your all IoT devices. The guy was showing the real devices, how to connect them. He was also coding on the presentation. So it was a very technical presentation. So some of the presentation I really like, the technical ones. So I really enjoy it. And then was another BOF, and this one, which should be for us very interesting, was about creating user groups and networking user groups. So people came up, and during the lunch we was discussing how to create successful user group with a lot of people and pizza, and that was kind of exciting. It turns out that Polish BSD user group is the biggest one in Europe. Maybe it's not today, but in general it's the biggest one. And a lot of problems that we have during organizing BSD user group, the other communities have also. And we was brainstorming how we can solve them. So for example, the language was one of the issues that everybody have, so it should be a native language, so for example in Polish, or all the presentation should be in English. So it was very exciting to discuss with people such issues. Later I attended the FreeBSD for a Linux developer perspective, and the presentation was interesting. There was a lot of data, a lot of graphs, a lot of comparisons, more about the commits and how much bigger Linux community is. Then I was expecting a little bit more. Basically, I was expecting how you can develop FreeBSD from the Linux developer perspective, but it was a kind of different presentation. But yeah, if you are interested in the statistic part of running open source projects, then this is something that you can which you can see. Later, there was a presentation about the. I attended the presentation about FreeBSD ARM hypervisor done by Michał. I couldn't attend the Philip presentation, but I invited him here, so I hope I can listen to it now. Yeah. And then there was another presentation from Aaron, who did the presentation about the radio stuff, the Road Warrior disaster recovery. This was very, very interesting presentation. I think this is kind of my favorite presentation. It wasn't as much technical one, but it was talking about recovering his OpenBSD laptop when everything basically is failing. So how much work he would need to put today if he would have only pen drive with OpenBSD to restore his OpenBSD computer. It was very interesting, very funny one, so I really recommend that. If you are more into the OpenZFS, FreeBSD, and Beehive, Michael Textor was also doing a presentation about putting many FreeBSD versions, the old versions, onto one box. Sorry, I saw that presentation during Asia BSDCan, so it was very interesting as well, but yeah. Sorry. Okay, so this was the last presentation of the day, and then was a small party with networking. We can chat with other peoples and so on. But before that, there was also a big and interesting auction. So after the BSDCan, there is always the auction of cookies or some stuff that was found. So for example, there was a solicitation of a Bob Beck jacket, which went for around $150. And it was like, you know, the guy is sitting and I want my jacket. I go with $10, and the guy next to him, okay, I will not give you this jacket, $20, and it was pretty funny. And if you can, if you want to laugh a little bit, you can see that. So other funny story was that Michael Lucas wrote a new novel, and Bob Beck bought this novel for the first version of the novel, I think, for $100 or so. And afterwards, Dan took out, but this is the last chapter of the novel, so who wants that? So it was pretty funny, and yeah, This is a tradition, and all of this cash, all this cash from the licitation go for charity. So after BSDCan, we have our FreeBSD hackathon. We needed to go from Ottawa, where we was originally, to Kitchener, Waterloo, where is the university that held the BSDCan. It wasn't 99 hours to go there, but you know, it took like 1 day with the car or so. So hackathon took 3 days. This hackathon was more focused about the code than about the idea. So we finally get to code. There was a lot, around 16 people, so it wasn't a big one, but it was enough for us. And there was some topics that we was able to discuss. So there was a Bjorn who was very into the Wi-Fi stuff and showing some internals of the Wi-Fi drivers. I was there, and Ed Mas was there, and Maya from University of Canada, and we was able to talk a lot about the Capsicum stuff, and Mark Lemon did a book busting session where we basically go through Bugzilla and close some old bugs, apply some old patches. And there was a session from Mark Johnson who did a syscaller session. So we was able to fast the FreeBSD and patch some problems and add some new syscalls to syscaller. So it was very, very entertaining. This is what basically it was looking like. This was it was held in the university, so we got university rooms, and we was able to. One person was basically on the near the blackboards and type some stuff and so on. It was very entertaining. Okay, so thank you very much. Maybe there are some questions. If not, then thank you.